So maybe by now you're wondering, what is that crazy thing? That is a large foot, my friends. But also, who the heck am I? Why am I so obsessed with feet, right? Why is there a big picture of a foot behind me? Well, it's because it all started with a crazy lawnmower accident when I was a kid. Yep, didn't work out so well. My parents had an old lawnmower, and this was back before the days of, I'm not all that old, but my parents had a little bit older lawnmower. I don't want to age myself here, but it didn't have the little guard thing, and the handle broke. I went and I stepped forward, and I had to jump over the top of the lawnmower, and sure enough, clipped my foot in there. Thankfully, it took off just the top of my foot, all the skin down to the tendons and all that kind of gross stuff. But I was able to keep everything. Didn't get anything chopped off. But it's what started my whole foot problem because they actually made me sit there for a very long time in almost like a cast-like thing to make sure that nothing else was nicked or any other problems that things would heal up. So that's where I started having some dysfunction, and that was on my left foot. A few years later, I was playing football, and a person dove in to my right ankle and ended up cracking a bone in half, my navicular bone, which is right at the center of the arch bone, and completely tearing off the deltoid, the delta ligament, which is the strongest ligament of the body, and it's the inside of the ankle. Complete tear off, was a very unhappy camper. Came back from that, and then the next year, someone stomped on my foot and broke my sesamoid in half. Now, we didn't know this at first. I ended up seeing several doctors, going to a lot of different specialists, and it wasn't until maybe like the second podiatrist that found the fracture. It's a tiny little bone that's underneath the big toe, and this was the foot that had been chopped up in the lawnmower, so they didn't really know what was going on and where the pain was coming from, but I ended up having very long-term pain from this accident. They didn't figure out where the pain was coming from. When they did, the only solution that they provided for me was a big, thick, heavy orthotic. Now, I was like at the top of my game in sports. I was in football, wrestling, all of these crazy sports. And needless to say, it wrecked my day. It was not a good adventure, but I followed the doctor's orders and I wore these orthotics and they massively slowed me down and I lost a lot of function. But here's where the story comes in, is that by the time I started getting halfway through college, I started getting severe joint pain. Severe joint pain. I started getting the whole bunion effect. So I started getting my toe going over. I started getting a big bulge through here, and not the bunion bulge, but from underneath where the sesamoid had cracked, I started getting a whole bunch of just tight tissue balling up in through there. It really led to a lot of discomfort, but I was still pretty young, was able to keep going. But by the time I got to chiropractic school, things were pretty rough on me. So the crazy thing, even in chiropractic school, physical therapy school, medical school, all of these schools, they brief over the foot. There's not much education on the actual mechanics of the foot and what to do about it. So I ended up thankfully finding another chiropractor who was obsessed about feet. And it started my path and it started my journey to learning how the foot should be functional. Now, in the meantime, there was a few other ankle sprains, a few other avulsion fractures in my ankle from sports, and one random one where I stepped in a hole when I was running with my dog and snapped my ankle and ripped a piece of the bone off of the side of my fibula. But anyways, I had to become obsessed because in private practice, running around and I was working on people's feet, I myself was getting to the point where my toes were overlapped. So on my left foot, my pinky toe had been severely curled in, my big toe severely curled in, and my second toe was actually on top of my big toe and causing all sorts of blister pain and things of that nature. But I had no mobility. I literally couldn't even do this with my toe. There was just no flexibility. I dreaded getting out of bed in the morning. I had so much pain for those first like hour steps. I just didn't want to do it. And so I had to become even more obsessed because instead of relying in chiropractic school, I could rely on a doctor like trying to crack my toe and those sorts of things. In private practice, I didn't have that. I was working by myself, and the pain just kept getting worse and worse. And I had to figure out how to take care of it myself. So I ended up doing that, and now I want to say, here's the crazy success story, is that this year I completed my first 110-mile hike in Vibrams, and those are the 5-finger minimalist shoes that basically have nothing to them. So I went from heavy orthotics, rigid toe, couldn't move, they were crossed over, pain waking up every single day, to now I have zero pain. My toes are nice and open like that. I can actually move my pinky toes and everything individually. I can get to the point where I hop around, I hop out of bed, I have no pain. And I did this big hike this last year as like my bucket list prove to myself, because this is a lot, you know, going on a 110-mile hike is a lot of effort into the foot. Especially going through where I went through of like rocky hills and swamps and all sorts of cool adventure things that I was doing. But I didn't have pain, and I definitely had soreness, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't pain, and I was so happy and so thrilled about that. So that's my personal story on why I became obsessed with that. The other side of it is that I was obsessed for my patients, and this is why I became the foot expert in town, is because pure, plain and simple, whole package, giving stuff to do for people, to do at home, while working on them, and being able to figure out what was actually wrong with them to apply the knowledge. Now, the cool thing that I learned over time is that step by step, I realized the root problem of a lot of people's issue. They would come in with the diagnosis, and early on in my career, I would just treat the diagnosis. But when I started getting real results, and I'm talking like one person in particular named Sarge, he was a military person who had been, his career was in Afghanistan jumping off of tanks, and he ended up getting severe ankle arthritis and toe arthritis. And previous to going into the military, he was a competitive speed skater. Now, 25 years later, something of that nature, he's wanted to get back into it, but he didn't have the ankle and toe flexibility. Literally, he couldn't fit his foot in to the skate because there was so much arthritis in his toes. And working with him, working with Sarge, we got everything back, and within a year-and-a-half time frame, 2 seasons time frame, he came back and won the national championship in speed skating. And he attributes it to being able to get low, and it's speed skating. This is the sport where they get down and they touch the ice, right? As they're going around the corner, it's a crazy sport. The only way that you can do that is actually if you have ankle and toe flexibility in your boot so that you can get down to the ice. And when we first started, he was just up high, could barely move. He felt like he didn't have power through his skates. So working with him, we got all that situated. And he's just one of the many success stories that we had in the office. But we learn every time we go more and more success stories through that. Shirley, who came to me with knee pain, we actually determined a lot of it was through her feet. And she was a competitive cyclist in, again, the master's category. And we started taking care of that, and she just took off. It was crazy to see her success, crazy to see how her knees transformed, all of the downstream effects of where if you approach the whole foot, if you approach all of the tightness and all of the issues, you can have massive success. So I'll leave you with those couple of stories, and we'll get into the next video and hopefully inspire you to really, like, the whole point of these videos is to kind of give you the tools that you need to start working on yourself. So the next video, we're going to go over exactly that, and we're going to teach you why the DIY approach is the best thing for your feet.